just, I wanted to be intentional about how I lived, so I wouldn't feel regret. 25 years ago, I gave a workshop called Choosing Happiness. Are you living your life by design or by default? That has been my mantra for the past several decades. For example, the year before I turned 40, my self-imposed cutoff for having a child, I spent months exploring the possibility of single parenthood. I read about having a child alone by birth or by adoption. I journaled. I did hypnotherapy to see if I could imagine myself doing it. Did it feel right? After months of exploring, I had to acknowledge that it didn't. And since I made an intentional decision, I never felt regret. Disappointment at times, sure, but not regret. And now I stand at another cusp. I turned 70 yesterday. 70. I know for some of you that probably sounds like a young one, but for me, it's a wake-up call. That life is running short. Time is running out. And how do I want to spend these precious days? I use as my guidepost on my reflection 3 questions. Who do I want to be? How do I want to live? And what really matters? Who do I want to be? In other words, how do I live by design and not by default? Historically, my default mode is what one of my spiritual mentors calls safety consciousness, or what is the problem and how do I fix it? Having experienced a great deal of trauma in both my childhood and much of my adulthood, I became an expert in looking out for problems and fixing them. I became a self-described resource queen. Since I didn't feel safe growing up, it makes sense to me that I made safety a priority to navigate life. But while I'm grateful for this strategy, I now realize that operating from fix-it mode became my habitual way of living. So I'm asking myself, do I need to continue making safety consciousness my default? This leads to my next question. How do I want to live? The word that arises and has arisen for many years is aliveness. How would I be living if I dared to be fully alive, without holding back? I've created an entirely different life from the one I grew up, or that I lived the first half of my adult life as I began to heal from childhood trauma. I've created a full, rich life with self-knowledge and understanding, and even self-love, with a growing connection to the universal source, with community, deep friendships, and meaningful work as a psychotherapist and an activist. And, most surprising, a deep, loving friendship and romantic partnership with Nancy. Yes, for those of you who wondered who the lucky woman was who she'd fallen in love with, it's me. So I'm asking myself if I still need safety consciousness. Well, yes, sometimes. But is that how I want to live in my 70s? No. I want to live from a place of aliveness. And now that I've created a new life, a new lens through which I see myself, I've even been playing with a new name, Bina, which means wisdom and understanding. What really matters? As I turned 70, I'm at another threshold, recognizing my old pattern where I have one foot on the gas pedal reaching for my aliveness, and the other braking for safety. I'm juggling this polarity. Do I dare allow myself to feel my joy, to be fully alive? How do I honor the fearful parts of me without allowing them to run my life? I considered these questions in choosing whether or not to mask for my reflection today. As some of you know, my immune system is not strong, so I've chosen to be cautious in protecting myself from COVID, and in particular long COVID, by continuing to wear a mask indoors. There is safety. On the other hand, I have a desire to be seen, to connect with all of you face to face. So I decided to follow my new path, to live the questions, and allow my inner knowing to guide me. Holding this polarity about whether or not to mask for my reflection, safety versus aliveness, my inner knowing said, go for it. Thank you.
Good morning. It's nice to see you, everyone. My three questions are, what is faith, what is hope, and what is love? When I was a young child, my little brother asked me if I wanted to send our names to the local TV station to try to win the mini TV they were raffling at the time. I didn't know how he knew about this, but I liked the idea. My mom mailed our entries and we waited. I prayed fervently for that TV for weeks, staying on my knees for a long time each night. On the last day of the raffle, after the late night news, the newsman reached into the playpen full of letters and pulled out mine, reading, "The winner is Jeanne Arthur, written in cherry red crayon." I recall my mother's dancing silhouette in the doorframe of my bedroom, outlined by the bright hall light, when she woke me with excitement. Later, a truck delivered the TV, and it stayed mostly unused by both my brother and me for the next 14 years. Until I gave it to a college boyfriend. A couple of years later, my dad took my siblings and me, along with another family, camping on a small, sandy, treeless island in our town's harbor. We owned a red boat at the time, named Lamb Chop. A little dinghy, mint jelly, accompanied Lamb Chop. That was my father. We set up our blankets and sleeping bags under the bright moonlight and played board games. Eventually, everyone fell asleep, to be woken by thunder, flashes of lightning, and cold rain in the middle of the night. We children were crowded under the tiny bulkhead in the bow, with me being nearest to my father as he navigated the boat across the open water. I was worried about my family and petrified of lightning hitting our boat, and did not stop my mantras of Hail Marys and Our Fathers until we were safely back on land. I prayed a lot as a child. I continue to pray a lot now as an older adult, and to rely on my talks to God when navigating difficult challenges, and just in general. My relationship with God is the foundation of my belief in and the practice of the labor of the triad, consisting of faith, hope, and love. Faith is no longer so blind to me as it was in my youth, but it still remains the backbone of my life. Faith to me is a search for and focus on divine guidance, and to notice the divine mystery in nature and relationship that daily surrounds us. Hope for me is when I notice someone in the act of caring for another being, for a garden, for a passion, for a cause. Hope is actively seeking the better in humanity and life, and to commit to compassion in all moments, even in experiences of profound fear. Regarding love, someone once said, "Love isn't love until it is given away." I am in great debt to my parents for showing me unconditional love throughout my life. This never wavered. Trust me, I really tested them. It is out of gratitude to them and for life that I am able to return to the practice of actions founded in love and persevere through my frustrations, losses, and failures. The writer of commentary on Dante's comedy, Dorothy Sayers, has written, "It is a symbol of the truth that we are only capable of entering those states of being which we are first capable of imagining." For me, both contemplative prayer and active prayer have provided thresholds to imagining more conscious ways to be and for expressing more loving actions. Power on in transcendent mystery, compassion, and love with courage and wonder.
Please rise now in body or in spirit and open your grip to go into therapy. That's what they kept telling me. Everybody said it, my minister, my mentor, my friends, my parents, everybody. No matter what program you're in, they told me, graduate school breaks you down and turns you into a different person. And the process of learning to think in a new way forces you to question every milestone in your life, every little event that you thought had no real impact on your psyche, every relationship you've ever had, from your mother to the first person you kissed, even that former boss you wish you could forget. So I did. I went into therapy while I was preparing for seminary. I began a relationship with a therapist. And every week I'd come in talking about whatever challenge was going on in my life. And Jeff, a big, tall, handsome, athletic, cis-het white guy who was unpacking his own privilege way before it was cool, would say the same thing to me. I'd say something like, "I want to tell that client to take his business elsewhere," or "Sometimes that person makes me want to run away and change my name." And every single time he'd say the same thing. Before you say or do anything, ask yourself 3 questions. Is it true? Is it kind? And does it serve? Now, Jeff didn't invent those questions. Socrates is credited with first articulating the questions slightly differently. He asked, is it true? Is it kind? And is it necessary? Now, the first 2 questions are easy enough, I guess, at least in the days before truthiness and the daily barrages of misinformation and disinformation. Truth was pretty cut and dried. There was factual correctness and philosophical truth. And I think most of us here, understood that something could be both factually incorrect, yet still be true. Like a mythological wisdom tale or a parable. And kindness, subjective as it is pretty easy to spot. Meeting people where they are, being aware of our own judgments, being lovingly honest, all are acts of kindness. Even when we're telling harmless little lies, if you can save someone from unnecessary hurt by a little untruth, that's kind. And maybe in a way is its own kind of truth. But what is unnecessary or necessary? And sometimes that's not so clear. Somewhere along the line, a lot of Buddhist thinkers and others, like Jeff, my therapist, adopted the Socratic method of ethical decision-making, but changed the third question to, does it serve? And that still feels like a really broad question to me, like, does it serve the other person? Does it serve the greater good? Does it serve humanity? Does it serve the tenets of my faith? The God of my understanding? And the more I thought about that third question, the creepier I felt, to tell you the truth. I thought about all those conservative evangelicals who would justify persecuting trans folks. Like, seriously, I could totally picture them justifying their abusive and oppressive behavior by saying things like, yes, it's true, there are only two genders and nothing else. Or, yes, it is kind, that person needs to know the truth, and the sooner they learn it, the happier they'll be. Neither one of those feel true or kind to me. And I could see them saying, yes, it serves. It serves God's plan for humanity. Yuck. That is not how I want to be in relationship with other people, and that is definitely not how I imagine a creative, loving God working in the world. Certainly I can't imagine that's the God that Jeanne prayed to as a child. So the question, does it serve, felt too moldable to blind self-service. So I decided, in a very UU way, to adopt the questions again for myself. So now I ask, is it true? Is it kind? And whom does it serve? Because let's face it, everything serves somebody. And everything we say, everything we do serves someone. And we need to be really clear about who it is that is being served. Like you, I'm sure, I spend a lot of my life concerned about the needs of others. Sometimes, often really, I put the needs of others before my own needs. But I know that if I do that habitually, unthinkingly, over time, that starts to get kind of codependent, and then I can start to be resentful, and that doesn't really serve anyone. So in order to avoid building up those negative feelings, I say or do things that are true and kind, and I know they serve nobody but me. And I'm okay with that. I'm really okay with that. So does any of this, you may be asking yourself right now, have anything to do with Unitarian Universalism, especially on a Sunday when we celebrate 9 new returning members? And I think that's a very good question. Well, we're on a journey together. When we extinguish our chalice, we speak of sharing our light with those we encounter on our journey. Our mission statement speaks of seeking justice, and nobody ever sought anything by sitting home alone. I've talked about our 8 principles being like a bridge that supports our journey together. And our 8th principle makes it explicit, calling our work a journey towards spiritual wholeness in which we build a multicultural, beloved community. And the thing is, this is an epic journey we're on, and epic journeys are meant to be shared through stories. Stories like the parable of the trapeze I shared earlier, stories like Jeanne's story, stories like Bina's story, stories like Octavia Butler's parable of the sower from which our chalice lighting came. Now the thing is that those kinds of stories, those kinds of parables are more than just cautionary tales or morality stories. They're the mythological tales that we tell to convey the values of our faith community. They're not just saying, do this because this is the right thing to do. They're saying, this is how we act, how we treat each other, and how we strive to understand the world and our place in it. Parables are one of the ways we help to explain to one another the challenges we grapple with as we make sense of our lives on our journeys, determining the kinds of people that we want to be, how we want to live, and what kind of relationship we want to have with the sacred, creative, force of the universe, however we name that. Parables help us each formulate the questions each of us asks ourselves as we make tough decisions or reflect on the meaning of the events in our lives. And this is why we gather, why we commit ourselves to making sure this place exists for ourselves, for our posterity, and the future community that we seek to make possible. In this world, where the effects of isolation and loneliness are becoming our biggest health and safety issues, I think this is why people want to join with us. Why 9 have stood up here today. Why a few more are eager to join in our next round. Why more will come over the coming weeks and months and years. We're on this journey where we ask tough questions of ourselves and each other, where we tell the stories that help us make sense of those questions. And I'm so glad that we are all here helping each other make our way in the world. Together, maybe we can even turn the world around. So let's rise now in body or in spirit and open our teal hymnals to the last hymn, number 1074, Turn the World Around, which was written by Harry Belafonte.